Born October 11th of 1884, Eleanor Roosevelt grew up to be one of the most groundbreaking icons that refined the role of the First Lady of the United States. She advocated for human rights, women's rights, and became a powerful female diplomat and politician. Hi, my name is Juliet Monteverde, and I'll be speaking on the life and times of Eleanor Roosevelt. Due to the experiences from a young age and the life she pursued as an activist led her to be the most remarkable and progressive First Lady of the United States. Her successful career consisted of sharing her solutions to better the nation by using rhetorical speaking techniques to emphasize her beliefs. From doing research through the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences website, we can get a better glimpse of the work she has done. Eleanor lost both of her parents at a young age and went on to live with her grandparents, who provided her with an excellent education by hiring private tutors. At the age of 15, they sent her to Allenswood Academy School of Girls in England, where she was mentored by the headmistress herself, who promoted social responsibility and independence for young women. Eleanor was very involved in social reform. When she came back to New York City at the age of 18, she became actively involved by volunteering as a teacher for impoverished immigrant children and joined the National Consumers League to eventually end unsafe working conditions and labor practices. Also, during the World War I, she volunteered at the American Red Cross and Navy hospitals. Eleanor married Franklin Roosevelt in 1905, and he started his political career by becoming the New York State Senate in 1910. Later on, in 1933, Franklin Roosevelt became the 32nd President of the United States, which made Eleanor the First Lady. This is when Eleanor began to radically transform the role of the First Lady from a social hostess to an active participant of the administration. Considering this was in the 1930s and she was a female, this was groundbreaking and unusual, which made her iconic and a role model. She was an early supporter of civil rights for African American and women's rights. She used her power as the First Lady to encourage the appointment of more women in the federal positions, and she voiced the need of equal human rights in the nation. September 28, 1948, Eleanor Roosevelt gave one of her many speeches at the Sorbonne University in Paris, called The Struggles for Human Rights. At this time, she was the chair of the freshly created Board of the United Nations that had been handed the responsibility of coming up with a draft for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. One of the reasons she gave this speech was to enact her passion for humanitarian and civil rights issues as a human rights advocate herself. Even so, the major reason she gave this speech was an attempt to win the approval of the UN member states so that they could vote for the declaration aiming to protect individual liberties. As she begins her speech, she states, "I have come this evening to talk with you on one of the greatest issues of our time, that is the preservation of human freedoms." She further says, "It seems to me there is a valid reason for taking the time today to think carefully and clearly on the subject of human rights, because in the acceptance and observance of these rights lies the root, I believe, of our chance for peace in the future and for the strengthening of the United Nations organization to the point where it can maintain peace in the future." As I examined her speech, these parts appeal to the ethical responsibility from the audience, and her credibility can be perceived by the strong and confident tone she has. In addition, she also reveals her experience and achievements by stating, "I have served since the first meeting of the Nuclear Commission on the Right and the Human Rights Commission, and I think this point stands out clearly. This portrays her tough ethos." To exercise her pathos, Eleanor Roosevelt reveals her appeal of emotion from the audience through the use of phrases such as "our nation" and "we in the United States." This connects her and includes herself as a part of the audience. She also tries to access empathy by reminding her listeners of the tragedy that was experienced in the greatest historical battles for the fight of freedom. This is exhibited by this statement, "I have chosen to discuss this issue in Europe because this has been the scene of the greatest historic battles between freedom and Trinity." She elevates emotion and feelings by reminding of the great battles that have occurred due to the fight for our freedom. Eleanor tends to use logos frequently by reasoning with her audience as to why the need of human rights is so important. She uses logos by providing the United Nations delegates with facts directly from the Constitution, and this implies the knowledge she has. As she explains the importance of the Human Rights Declaration to her audience, she directly cites the importance of the UN in this matter from the preamble and Constitution. She states, "One of the purposes of the United Nations is declared in Article 1, to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and encouraging the respect for human rights, without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion." By citing, she persuades the audience through logic and reasoning. Eleanor often uses rhetorical devices to effectively and persuasively deliver her points of view to the listeners, which empowers her to convince the audience. She uses anaphora, which is the repetition of the first set of words, quite a lot through her speech to emphasize her points and the importance of them. For example, when she listed some freedoms humans must have, such as freedom of speech and freedom of express, freedom of religion and worship, freedom of assembly. This is done so the words freedom is stuck to the listener and makes them focus on the importance of all these freedoms. Additionally, she uses another type of repetition as a persuading tool called anadiplosis, which is the repetition of the last word in one sentence as the beginning of the next sentence. Here's an example. She says, "They are tools with which we created a way of life in which we can enjoy freedom." The reason why she does these repetitions is to assert and emphasize the importance. This works as a hypnosis for the listener to be often reminded of the whole point behind the lengthy speech. She has composed excellent speeches with powerful meaning to stand for human rights and express the immediate need for them to be executed. As a woman herself, she stood up for civil rights, women's rights, the working class, the poor, and the young. She used her husband's platform to voice progressive ideologies and spread them throughout the world. By the time of her death, she was regarded as one of the most esteemed women in the world and the object of almost universal respect.
I'm going to read you the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, therefore, the General Assembly proclaims this Universal Declaration of Human Rights as a common standard of achievement for all peoples and all nations, to the end that every individual and every organ of society, keeping this declaration constantly in mind, shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance. These things must be well understood because even though you accept treaties and countries ratify those treaties, the real change which must give to people throughout the world their human rights must come about in the hearts of people. We must want our fellow human beings to have rights and freedoms which give them dignity and which will give them a sense that they are human beings that can walk the earth with their heads high and look all men in the face. If we observe these rights for ourselves and for others, I think we will find that it is easier in the world to build peace, because war destroys all human rights and freedoms. So in fighting for those, we fight for peace.